There was a time when Dolph Lundgren wasn't just an action star. He was the action star you didn't want to meet in a dark alley. 6'5", ice blue stare, a jawline carved from Swedish granite, and fists that could, quite literally, break you. On screen, he looked like the human embodiment of a tank, unstoppable, unshakable, and just a little terrifying. But here's the twist. The man Hollywood cast as the ultimate cold-blooded villain was actually a genius. And I mean actual genius. A Fulbright scholar in chemical engineering who spoke multiple languages and could just as easily be found in a lab coat as in a boxing ring. Born Hans Lundgren in Stockholm, Sweden in 1957, Dolph grew up in a strict household under a demanding military father. He excelled in academics and sports, but it was karate that became his obsession, earning a black belt and winning European championships before most actors were done struggling through acting school. By the early 80s, he was living in New York, working security, and dating a certain pop superstar named Grace Jones. It was Grace who pushed him toward modeling and acting, because let's be honest, with that face and that build, the camera didn't stand a chance. And then came the audition that changed everything. A young, hungry Dolph walked into a casting call for Rocky IV, and even Sylvester Stallone admitted later that when he first saw him, he thought, "Oh no, this guy might actually kill me." The role of Ivan Drago, the cold, unfeeling Soviet machine, was supposed to be menacing, but Dolph made it mythic. He barely spoke, but every line became instantly quotable. If he dies, he dies. That wasn't just a villain, it was a cultural moment. Overnight, Dolph went from an unknown Swede to one of the most feared and secretly admired faces in Hollywood, and studios were already lining up to cash in on his new bad guy aura. But here's the thing about a rocket ride to the top. It almost always comes with turbulence on the way down. And for Dolph Lundgren, the turbulence was coming. After Rocky IV, Dolph Lundgren didn't just walk into Hollywood. Hollywood basically threw him a parade. Overnight, he became the blonde, chiseled 6'5" embodiment of 1980s action masculinity. If Arnold Schwarzenegger was the king, Dolph was the shiny new prince. Casting directors weren't subtle. They wanted him shirtless. They wanted him holding giant futuristic weapons. They wanted him growling one-liners through those perfect Nordic cheekbones. And for a moment it was working. His next big role? He-Man in Masters of the Universe, 1987. A movie that should have been a slam dunk. Toy line, built-in fan base, massive marketing budget, but instead became a cautionary tale in how not to adapt a cartoon. The costumes were campy, the special effects were tragic, and the script was, well, somewhere between incoherent and a 2-hour toy commercial. Dolph? He looked incredible. The problem was he had about 3 times as much dialogue as he could realistically deliver with his still thick accent and limited acting experience. Critics pounced. The Los Angeles Times basically called him a piece of set dressing. Still, the movie bombed hard enough to put a dent in his next Arnold trajectory. But Hollywood wasn't done with him. They just narrowed the lane. Cue the wave of very on-brand roles. The stoic Soviet soldier in Red Scorpion, the unstoppable killing machine in The Punisher, 1989, long before Marvel movies were box office gold. The cyborg in Universal Soldier, 1992, opposite Jean-Claude Van Damme, which became a surprise hit and solidified his place in the VHS action pantheon. By the early 90s, Dolph Lundgren had a very specific fan base. Dudes who rented movies from the action section of Blockbuster and didn't care about plot as long as there were explosions. But there was a problem. The real action stars, your Stallones, your Arnies, your Bruce Willises, were getting theatrical releases, big paydays, and actual critical respect. Well, sometimes. Dolph's movies? More and more of them were going straight to video, which, in Hollywood terms, is like getting demoted from the big leagues to playing minor league ball in Iowa. Still, Dolph kept cranking them out. And he did have a certain self-awareness. He knew he wasn't going to be delivering Shakespeare. He was selling biceps, stunts, and charisma. But behind the scenes, there were whispers that he was difficult on set. that he was too proud to take smaller supporting roles that could have reinvented him, that his personal life, especially his long, volatile relationship with Grace Jones, was colourful, to put it mildly. Grace Jones, for the record, was the opposite of quiet. She reportedly chased him down hotel hallways, fought with him in public, and at one point allegedly bit him during an argument. The tabloids ate it up. Hollywood execs? Not so much. They wanted their action heroes squeaky clean and marketable. By the mid-90s, the cracks were showing. The straight-to-video market that had been his safety net was drying up. Studios were chasing new stars, younger, edgier, bankable names. And Dolph? He was still trying to be the leading man in movies with titles like Men of War, Silent Trigger and Sweepers, all while audiences were moving on. The golden boy glow was fading. And in Hollywood, once the shine wears off, the phone stops ringing real fast. The question now was, would Dolph adapt, or would he cling to the action hero image until it collapsed around him? By the late 90s, Dolph Lundgren had something Hollywood executives fear more than a box office bomb: irrelevance. And here's the thing about being an 80s action star. Once the public decides you're past your prime, they don't just move on, they erase you from the pop culture conversation. One year you're a poster on teenage bedroom walls, the next you're sandwiched between Cyborg Cop 2 and Nemesis Timelapse on the discount DVD rack at Walmart. The blockbuster days were over. He wasn't competing with Stallone anymore. He was competing with Steven Seagal's direct-to-video era. And that's a dark place to be. Studios had stopped offering him theatrical releases. Instead, Dolph's movies were quietly debuting in video stores in Canada or getting dumped on late-night cable slots in Eastern Europe. His leading man roles now had titles like Stormcatcher, Agent Red, Detention, no, not the Josh Hutcherson one, the one with Dolph trying to stop terrorists from blowing up a high school. And these weren't just B-movies. Some were barely above student films with bigger explosions. We're talking recycled action scenes from other movies, scripts that looked like they were written over a weekend, and dialogue so bad it made Masters of the Universe sound like Shakespeare. Behind the scenes, the whispers kept going. Dolph was too picky about doing supporting roles in better projects, convinced he could still be the star, which meant turning down smaller but respectable parts in order to headline stuff nobody was watching. And then there was the money problem. Dolph had been living like an A-lister. Nice homes, expensive cars, exotic vacations, even when his paychecks were shrinking. Friends quietly noted that he wasn't adapting to post-fame life very well. He wasn't broke yet, but the lifestyle didn't match the revenue anymore. Meanwhile, Hollywood had a new set of action heroes. Will Smith, Keanu Reeves, Matt Damon, even Vin Diesel. Younger guys with franchise appeal. Studios weren't looking to revive the Dolph Lundgren brand. They were more likely to stick him in a cameo as that guy from Rocky IV, if they used him at all. By the early 2000s, if you wanted to find Dolph, you didn't go to the theaters. You went to the action section of a video store in a strip mall. Or you stumbled across him on basic cable at 2 a.m. while flipping channels. And then came the humiliation cherry on top. Red carpet interviews where reporters only asked about Rocky IV and what it was like to work with Stallone. Never mind the decades of work since. In the public's mind, Dolph Lundgren was frozen in time, still Ivan Drago, still saying, "I must break you." It was brutal. He'd gone from Hollywood's golden boy to a nostalgia punchline. The kind of celebrity you'd see pop up on reality TV just to remind people they were still alive. The only question left was, would Dolph lean into the nostalgia and make a comeback? Or would he fade away completely, remembered only by Gen X action nerds and the occasional ironic meme? By 2009, Dolph Lundgren wasn't just past his prime. He was so far out of the Hollywood orbit that you almost needed an archaeological dig to find his name in entertainment news. His biggest headlines were coming from European film festivals nobody attended, fitness magazines recycling old Rocky IV shots, and the occasional fan selfie in an airport where he looked like he was just trying to get through TSA without being recognized. But then, out of nowhere, Sylvester Stallone called. Now, Sly and Dolph hadn't exactly been inseparable since Rocky IV. In fact, their careers had taken completely different trajectories. Stallone had clawed his way back from his own career slump by doubling down on nostalgia, pumping out sequels to Rocky, Rambo, and basically any franchise that had his name attached. And in true Sly fashion, he had one big, ridiculous idea left. What if we throw every 80s and 90s action star into one giant movie, blow a ton of stuff up, and sell it to the world as pure testosterone nostalgia? That idea became the Expendables. The cast list was basically a Comic-Con fever dream. Stallone, Jason Statham, Jet Li, Mickey Rourke, Randy Couture, Terry Crews, and, because why not, Dolph Lundgren. Dolph was cast as Gunnar Jensen, the loose cannon of the crew. And he didn't just show up, he leaned all the way in. Gunnar was unpredictable, dangerous, and a little unhinged. Basically, if Ivan Drago had aged badly and gone freelance. Dolph got to play both the untrustworthy villain and the redemption arc in one movie. It was like Hollywood had finally remembered, oh right, this guy is huge, terrifying, and actually kind of funny when he wants to be. The movie exploded at the box office, $274 million worldwide, and suddenly the guy who'd been languishing in Bulgarian warehouse shootouts for $500K a pop was back on cinema screens. And here's where Dolph played it smart. Instead of pretending the wilderness years never happened, he leaned into them. He became self-aware, poking fun at his own image in interviews, joking about all the movies you've never heard of he'd made, and embracing the fact that most fans still knew him as Drago. Plus, the paycheck wasn't bad. And more importantly, The Expendables wasn't just a one-off. There were sequels. The Expendables 2, 2012. Bigger budget, bigger cast, bigger explosions. Dolph got even more screen time and one-liners. The Expendables 3, 2014. Critics hated it, but the nostalgia machine kept rolling. The Expendables 4, 2023. Yes, they made another one. And yes, Dolph was still there, proving that in Hollywood you can go missing for decades and still cash sequel checks. Outside of The Expendables, the comeback ripple effect was real. Dolph started getting invited to talk shows again, not the B-list daytime ones, actual late-night TV. He got voice work in animated projects, cameo offers, and even roles in movies that weren't strictly action junk food. Aquaman, anyone? And in a wild twist, Dolph started leaning into his brains again. He reminded people he actually has a master's degree in chemical engineering. The press suddenly remembered he wasn't just a muscle-bound villain. He was the muscle-bound villain who could also probably design a rocket. But here's the real kicker. Dolph's comeback wasn't about pretending he was still a 30-year-old action hero. It was about owning his legacy. He embraced the fact that the 80s made him, the 90s forgot him, and the 2000s buried him, and he used the 2010s to become a living, breathing tribute to that entire era. By the end of the decade, Dolph Lundgren wasn't a has-been anymore. He was an icon. One of the few who could actually laugh about the years Hollywood left him behind, because now he was back in the game. And he wasn't done. The man who once must break you had just broken the Hollywood curse of irrelevance. When the cameras stop rolling and the fake explosions fade out, Dolph Lundgren's life has been, well, surprisingly cinematic, and not always in the fun action movie way. Let's start with something few people knew until recently. In 2020, Dolph revealed that he had been quietly battling cancer, not just once, but for 8 years. It started in 2015, when doctors found a tumor in his kidney. He had surgery, thought it was over, but the cancer kept coming back. By the time he went public, he had 6 tumors removed, and doctors were talking in grim 2 years to live terms. And this wasn't just a health headline for sympathy. This was Dolph being shockingly open about facing his own mortality. He admitted that he started thinking about how much time he had left, whether he'd see his daughters grow up, and whether all the years spent doing stunt work and pushing his body to extremes had caught up to him. Which brings us to family life. Dolph has 2 daughters with his ex-wife Annette Kviberg, Ida and Greta, and if Instagram is any indicator, they adore him. But his romantic life has been, let's call it, tabloid adjacent. In 2020, at 62 years old, Dolph got engaged to Norwegian personal trainer Emma Krokdal, who was 24 at the time. Yes, the age gap headlines wrote themselves. The internet had a field day, with some dubbing him Ivan Drago Sugar Daddy Edition. But Dolph, unbothered, basically shrugged and said, "Love is love." Before that, he'd been linked to several high-profile women over the years, including Grace Jones. Yep, the Grace Jones, whom he famously dated while he was still a broke unknown working as her bodyguard. Grace is actually the one who pushed him into the spotlight. She dragged him to Andy Warhol parties, introduced him to people in the fashion world, and basically turned him into a walking, talking cover model before Stallone ever saw him. Financially, Dolph isn't exactly rolling in Schwarzenegger money, but he's done very well for someone who spent a good 15 years in direct-to-DVD limbo. As of 2025, his net worth is estimated at around $18 million. A mix of action movie paychecks, Expendables box office bonuses, directing fees, and the occasional brand endorsement. And, let's be honest, he's been smart about keeping his lifestyle comfortable without going full Nicolas Cage and buying dinosaur skulls. Health scares aside, the man is still working, still flying between LA, Europe, and film sets around the world. In fact, in interviews, he said that staying active is part of what keeps him going. Between acting, producing, and hitting the gym like it's still 1985, he's managed to stay in the public eye without overstaying his welcome. But here's the thing. Dolph Lundgren's real life has the same theme as his movies: survival. He survived Hollywood's discard pile, survived grueling action roles, survived the kind of tabloid stories that could have swallowed him whole, and now literally survived a life-threatening illness. At this point, the man isn't just an action hero. He's living proof that in both Hollywood and life, the fight isn't over until you decide it is. If you think about it, Dolph Lundgren's career shouldn't have lasted. The man was literally launched into Hollywood as the human embodiment of the Soviet threat. A 6'5", muscle-bound killing machine whose entire breakout role consisted of lines like, "I must break you." He wasn't supposed to be a household name for 4 decades. He was supposed to be a one-hit Cold War gimmick. But here we are, 2025. The Cold War's long gone, the VHS tapes have rotted away, and Dolph Lundgren is still here, looking like someone carved him out of marble, still getting cast in action movies, and somehow pulling off that rarest of Hollywood magic tricks, staying cool even after falling off the A-list. The 90s nearly killed him, professionally speaking. The big-budget roles dried up. He got stuck in a swamp of direct-to-video flicks with titles like The Peacekeeper and Stormcatcher, and it looked like the Drago mystique had faded into a trivia question. But instead of quitting, Dolph pivoted. He went behind the camera. He worked in Europe. He kept himself in shape, and, most importantly, he didn't burn bridges. So when Stallone came calling for the Expendables, he was ready. That Expendables comeback didn't just put him back in theaters, it made him relevant to a new generation. Suddenly, people who weren't even alive when Rocky IV came out were quoting his lines. He was doing Comic-Con panels, late-night talk shows, even parodying himself in sitcoms. Dolph Lundgren, the stoic Russian from the 80s, was now in on the joke. And here's the real kicker. Hollywood might have treated him like a disposable muscle prop in the beginning, but Dolph's outlasted more than a few guys who were once considered bigger stars. He's richer than some, fitter than most, and has something they don't: a reputation for being easy to work with. That alone can keep you employed in this business until the end of time. Now, he's not without controversy. The age gap relationship, the plastic perfect image, the occasional eyebrow-raising film choice. But in an industry drowning in scandal, Dolph has managed to dodge the kind of career-ending PR disasters that swallow up others. So what's next for the man who once broke Rocky Balboa? More movies, more producing, more surprise cameos, and probably more shirtless Instagram posts to remind the world that yes, at 67, the guy still looks like he could knock down a wall with his bare hands. Dolph Lundgren's story isn't one of meteoric rise and tragic fall. It's a slow burn. A story about a man who kept swinging, even when the crowd thought the fight was over. And maybe that's why he's still here. Because in Hollywood, like in the ring, the winners aren't always the flashiest. Sometimes they're the ones who know how to take a hit, get back up, and keep going until the other guy's too tired to fight. Dolph Lundgren, the man, the myth, the muscles, and the survivor.